Hey guys, Will here. So today we're taking a look at something a little bit different. This is the Go Kart Plus Cockpit from Next Level Racing. Now this is sold with two key things in mind. Firstly, to give you an authentic go-kart style seating position, as you can obviously see here, but also to give you the ability to easily switch between seating positions for both adults and children. You can, in most cases at least, genuinely adjust this thing to accommodate for both seating positions in under a minute, which is a really cool selling point. But having said that, there are quite a few issues with this cockpit too when it comes to build quality, particularly at the high price point that they're asking for this cockpit. So today we're going to be unpacking the Go Kart Plus Cockpit from Next Level Racing in all the detail that I think you need to know to decide whether this might be the setup for you. So let's dive in. Okay, so to begin with today, firstly, a couple of quick housekeeping things just so you have the full context of exactly what we're doing in today's video. So firstly, thank you to Next Level Racing for sending across this gear for us to check out today. Now, because it is quite a niche product, we're not going to be comparing it to a ton of other cockpits like we would normally do in these type of videos. We might make a couple of references to a few things that are relevant here, but if you are looking at cockpits for any sort of driving style, we do have a huge amount of reviews on boostedmedia.net or right here on this YouTube channel. So I would definitely recommend checking those out, making sure that you're getting the best possible product for your particular needs and budget. But as is always the case here, no third party has any sort of say in anything that we're talking about today. It is purely just going to be my own observations, my own opinions, and my own experience with this particular product. Now, if you do decide you want to pick up any of the products that you see in today's video or any other sim racing gear, check the links down in the description below on this video. We do have a bunch of discount codes and affiliate links available down there, which are an awesome way to save yourself a little bit of money and help support the channel in the process. So we really do appreciate your support there. But I think that covers everything you need to know before we get started. So let's dive in now, starting off with pricing information. Okay, so as I mentioned in the intro, this thing is quite pricey for what it is. And as we get through today's video, that'll make a little bit more sense as we go through rigidity, adjustments, build quality, and all those important details. But to give you the top level pricing information here, you're looking at $599 US. I believe that does include shipping if you buy from their online store in the US, but just check your local shipping prices, import duties and whatnot, depending on where you are in the world. They do sell these in some retail outlets, I believe, around the world as well. So just do your own research there. And again, do check those links down in the description for any relevant discount codes as well. So you're looking at $599 US or 999.95 Australian dollars from the Pagnian Imports website. And that does include free shipping and GST if you're in Australia. So there won't be any additional costs involved there in getting it to your doorstep. So that is just for the cockpit part of what you're seeing here. It does include the seat though, which is important because some other cockpits, although they may seem a little bit cheaper than this, may or may not include the seat. So just make sure that you are aware of that. Now, we also have the integrated monitor stand here as well, which isn't quite released at the time that we're recording this video, but they have given me some pricing information here. Of course, this is subject to change, but they're saying that the stand is going to be $99 US or 179 Australian dollars. And again, that may or may not include shipping depending on where you're buying it from. There is also a motion adapter kit available for this, which allows you to use it with their Motion Plus motion system. We took a look at that a little while back, so you can check out the review of that if you want to check that out as well. That guy will come in at $199 US or 299 Australian dollars. So quite expensive if you want to add motion onto this. You could fabricate something yourself, of course, as well if you have those kinds of skills, but it is good that they give you the option of having that if it's something that you're interested in. So that is everything you need to know in terms of pricing. I'm not going to cross-reference any other cockpits here simply because we haven't tested them out, but there are a couple of other options available. So again, just do your own research there. Make sure you're getting the most suitable thing for your needs. So I'm not going to take you through the entire assembly process like an assembly guide in today's video, simply because as we've come to expect from Next Level Racing, they do a fantastic job with their instructions. And you know, these are all things that you need to factor in when you're considering the price point here as well. They do put a lot of time and resource into producing these instruction manuals, which, you know, may or may not be something that's of value to you. But in fairness, I think it is important to point out these kinds of things. So yeah, assembly guide is very, very clear and easy to follow. If you can build a piece of IKEA furniture, you'll have absolutely no issues with this whatsoever. Everything's very clearly presented in both picture and written format here. And they do also have a QR code right in the front here as well, which leads you to an assembly guide. So yeah, check out that video for the most up-to-date instructions if they do make any design changes to the cockpit as well. But look, assembly process wise, all you guys need to know is that it was very simple to put together. There were a couple of areas where we had to kind of, you know, put a little bit of effort into things just to get them to line up correctly, but we didn't have any major problems with screws not fitting or cross-threading or anything like that. There are just a couple couple of alignment issues, which we'll get into in just a moment. But yeah, look, overall, it probably took us maybe 2 hours if you don't factor in recording stuff, and that included mounting pedals and, you know, fiddling around with a couple of different pedal sets as well to make sure that we're getting the best configuration. We will be talking about that extensively today because there are a couple of important considerations there. So assembly process, absolutely fine. Does come packaged in a single box as well. Very well packaged, very well protected as well. So there wasn't any damaged parts or anything like that. And you may have noticed the sticker on the side here was a little bit crazy out of the box. They did actually ship a couple of replacement stickers there. They told me that the original few batches of these cockpits had an issue with just things moving around inside the box. They now actually put apparently, we haven't seen it, but apparently they now have a little plastic layer that sits over the sticker to protect it so it doesn't move around like this. So if you do end up purchasing one of these, according to them, you shouldn't have this same issue with the sticker that we have here. So I mentioned earlier on in today's video that we have encountered a couple of issues when it comes to build quality and quality control overall. So let's just quickly run you through those issues now, and we'll show you more driving footage as we get through today's video and talk about the overall experience, of course, too. But it is important that you're aware of these issues. Now, if you remember back to our GT Racer cockpit review just about a month ago now, we had quite a few significant issues with flex throughout the base of the chassis. Now, one of the things that's really cool about this cockpit is it does actually come with little rubber feet like what we have installed here, but also caster wheels which you can swap out. So if you do want to have the option of easily moving the cockpit around in your living space, then that is included in the box, which I thought was a nice touch. Those caster wheels I thought were introducing quite a bit of flex into the chassis, but when I swapped over to the rubber feet, as you can see here, there is still quite a bit of flex in that chassis when I get into the load cell brake. So, I mean, this isn't a super high-end load cell that we're running here. This is a Fanatec CSL load cell, which is their most entry-level load cell pedal. And even still, you can see just pushing down even a little bit on that pedal, there's quite a bit of flex in the chassis down there. Now, obviously, depending on what kind of floor you're running this on will ultimately determine the experience here. If you're running on carpet, you're less likely to notice something like this. And in this particular case, it is actually some twist in the chassis itself. We did check that everything was tightened and that everything was aligned correctly. We went over it 3 or 4 times, in fact, just to make absolutely sure of that. But yeah, the chassis itself is actually twisted a little bit to the right, which ends up with this foot sitting a little bit off the ground. Now you can wind the foot out, add extra washers to compensate for that, but I just wanted to let you know what the experience was like out of the box for us. And if you do own one of these cockpits, let us know in the comments down below whether you've had a similar issue to this. I think that a lot of the things that we're going to be going through in today's video with regards to flex and twist and stuff will vary quite a bit from frame to frame. So it's going to be really valuable for people watching this video if you could share your experiences with this particular cockpit in the comments as well, because your experience might be completely different from mine. Now, the other issue that we have in terms of flex is just a flex in the chassis itself around this area down here. Very similar to what we saw in the GT Racer cockpit, if you saw that review recently, which we were able to actually mitigate to some extent with some straps across to add a little bit of extra rigidity. But we do actually have these reinforcement bars as part of the design on this particular cockpit. So I was quite surprised by the amount of flex that we see here. But when I get into the brake pedal a little bit more, with a little bit more aggression, so when I start to get into my threshold point here, you can see the entire chassis does start to lift up. That's just because I'm creating a lot of force between my foot and the seat of my pants. So when I'm pushing back into the seat, it's trying to lift up in the middle. So look, to put this in the correct context, I am quite a heavy braker. Even running a relatively entry-level load cell pedal like what we have here with the Fanatec CSL load cell, which is their most entry-level load cell brake pedal, I still do tend to brake with sort of 50 to 60 kilograms of force here. And you can see under my normal braking level, that's the amount of flex that I'm seeing. Obviously, if you've got small children using the cockpit, they're not going to be braking with anywhere near that kind of force, and it's probably not going to be an issue at all. So just need to put that in the correct context here. But for somebody like me that's used to using more high-end load cell pedals and the amount of force that I like to use on a brake, it's definitely something that you notice when driving. So another thing to be aware of there. And in case you're wondering, I did go through everything here just to make absolutely sure that everything was bolted in correctly. We hadn't missed any bolts, nothing was loose. So it does appear that that is likely to be the experience that you have as well. But again, if you own one of these, let us know in the comments down below. And then we have a couple of issues as well with alignment overall with the cockpit. Now, you may have already noticed on camera a couple of things here. Firstly, the screen does not sit straight at all. Now we do have this aligned correctly according to the bolt holes here. We spent quite a bit of time sort of trying to adjust and move things around, checking that our vase amount was correct and everything as well. What it actually is it's the alignment of these posts themselves. So they're physically a little bit bent when they're manufactured. It is a noticeable misalignment there. And that of course then throws off the view in the game as well, because when you load up a game and you have the cockpit sitting in front of you, everything's kind of off to the right-hand side in this particular example. And again, your experience is gonna vary here because this is a manufacturing tolerance issue. So, you know, you might find that yours is absolutely perfectly fine. Another person might find that it's a lot worse than what we have here. Another person might have it pointing off to the left instead of the right. You get the idea here. So that was a monitor stand. We'll circle back and talk about adjustment and whatnot with this a little bit later on. But I also want to highlight another issue which we noticed immediately before we'd even put a wheel or the monitor mount on this thing. So as soon as we bolted this wheel deck upright, which is actually quite rigid, and we'll get onto that in a little bit as well. But as soon as we bolted this thing onto the cockpit, I noticed that the entire thing, the actual wheel plate, was twisted a little bit to the left, so left-hand side, a little bit closer to me than the right-hand side. And that is, of course, contributing to the overall misalignment of the monitor here as well. In my case, it's actually improving it a little bit because the wheel is tilted off to the right-hand side a touch, so it actually brings it a little bit more into alignment than it would otherwise be. Now, my contact at Next Level Racing gave me the standard answer of, oh, we've never seen that problem before, which is what everybody always says about everything. And they did immediately send me out a new replacement part, which is this guy here. So we received this. It's actually got quite a bit of dust and dirt and stuff on it, which shows me that this was something that they actually pulled off a display unit in their showroom, I would imagine, rather than something that they just pulled out of a box. So you would imagine that they had checked this pretty thoroughly before they sent it to us. And, you know, we did receive it the next day, so that was good. But when I had a look at it, the alignment of this one is actually exactly the same as it is on this one. So when we mount it on there, it's still twisted. The wheel does still sit off center. It does sit about 3 or 4 millimeters lower on one side than the other. So it does just seem to be, again, those manufacturing tolerances that we were talking about before contributing to that. So again, it's gonna be a hit and miss thing. You might find that yours is absolutely fine. You might find that yours is worse than ours. Let us know in the comments down below what your experience has been like, but that has been ours. So before we even got up and running and driving on this thing, I was already pretty disappointed with the build quality for the price point. If it was, you know, if we're talking about a $200 cockpit here, these are the kinds of things that you would kind of go, yeah, it's not great, but, you know, maybe hit it with a mallet a couple of times, try to bend it back into alignment. If you're spending this kind of money, absolutely, I would be sending this thing back and asking for a replacement. And in our experience, you're likely gonna have the same problem anyway. So just a couple of things to be aware of there. That said though, when my son came down here and had a drive, he didn't even notice those problems and he absolutely loved the thing. So you do have to put it in context like that as well. But you know, for me, spending that kind of money, not kind of problems I would expect to experience. So I wanted to highlight those issues that we had close to the start of the video, just so that you're aware of them as we get on through today's video. But let's take a step back now, kind of rewind a little bit and actually take you through what we have here in terms of a cockpit. Now, it's a relatively modular kind of style design. What I mean by that is that what adjustments you make to the pedal tray, to the seat, to the wheel deck are all made independently of each other. So a lot of other Next Level Racing cockpits, you'll find if you go back and have a look at our reviews, the adjustments that you make in one area influence what you can do in other areas. So say, for example, the pedal tray is connected to the wheel deck upright. So when you move the wheel deck upright, obviously you then have to adjust the pedals as well. So everything is independent adjustment here. Let's just quickly run you through the overall design of the thing. Then we'll get into talking in a little bit more detail about adjustments. So we've got the seat, which sits on its own rails for sliding back and forth. We've got two halves to the tube frame, which you'll see in the assembly footage here. So the two halves go together and then bolt together. You've got some little holes down there as well, which I'm not 100% sure exactly what they're for yet. I'm assuming there must be some sort of a shifter or handbrake mount that they might be releasing later on. But at the moment, those holes aren't used for anything. You then have the center post style wheel deck, which bolts on here. That is capable of handling, by their claim, up to 13 Newton meters of torque. In our experience, we ran it up to 12 of continuous with the Club Sport DD wheelbase. And look, there's a little bit of flex, but it was within acceptable tolerances. I would say the overall flex that we feel inherent in the system elsewhere, particularly in relation to the frame kind of bending up under heavy braking, was much more noticeable than anything in the wheel deck itself. So I'm comfortable saying that it's okay for up to 12 Newton meters of continuous torque, in my experience at least. Again, let us know in the comments if you own one of these, what your experience has been like. And then we come forward to the pedal tray, which we'll come back to in just a second. The monitor mount just bolts on with 4 bolts on either side. in either position here, and you can actually move that forward or back about 13 inches or 33 centimeters. So that allows you to have, if you've got a bigger screen, you can put it all the way to the back here. Or if you've got a smaller monitor, you can bring it nice and close like what you see here. For reference, this is a 35-inch ultra wide that we've got mounted on here at the moment. The bracket that comes with has an array of different mounting options, but the important ones are of course the 100mm and 400mm VESA patterns, and it has both of those. So you're not gonna have a problem mounting most screens or TVs. Some screens, particularly curved screens, do require their own VESA mounts, as was the case with these particular monitors. So you will just need to make sure that you don't need to purchase any additional adapters from the monitor manufacturer to make your monitor work with a VESA mount, rather than just the normal desk stand that they normally ship with. A lot of monitors do actually ship with VESA adapters, but just double check there. We do have adjustment up and down here as well for the position of the monitor. So we have around 8 inches or 20.5 centimeters of adjustment up and down there. There is also a little bit of fine tuning adjustment available on the VESA mount itself. So we've got 4 bolts that secure, 2 in either side here. That does allow a little bit of tilt just to fine tune the position. There is also 4 bolts on the top and bottom, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, that allow you to slide the monitor forward and back, and do also allow a little bit of side to side adjustment. So that does allow you to dial out a little bit of that twist in the chassis that we were talking about before with the misalignment of the monitor. We did double check that though to make sure that that adjustment was zeroed out, and that what we were referencing before is in fact a twist in the frame itself, just in case you're wondering. And then you can see bolted onto the front and the rear of the tube frame are these plastic bumpers. Now, these are a bit of an interesting one because, you know, to an adult, I would imagine most of us would probably think, oh, you know, they're kind of superfluous. They don't really add any function, or they don't add any function to the cockpit overall. They take up extra packaging space. They make it unnecessarily more expensive. But look, I can tell you, when my son, who's 7 years old, came down the stairs down here, the first thing that he noticed in the room with all this stuff was, oh, go-kart, because he saw these bumper bars and it stood out to him. So the point I'm trying to make there is that while that is something that I would happily do away with, you know, it may appeal to some people, so I'm not gonna write it off completely either. But those do just mount on with a couple of brackets. They are quite a flimsy, fragile and brittle kind of plastic. And one thing that I did notice is that these edges in the front corners are quite sharp. So you wouldn't want your kids to be kicking that by accident or knocking it into a shin or something. And I can imagine the first time you do that, it is going to probably shatter, because it is, I mean, you can see it's flexing around quite a bit, but it is quite brittle plastic. So I feel like they could have used some softer plastic, or maybe used some rubber strip around that just to make it a little bit safer. But I'm nitpicking here, but again, you know, for $600 US, I think these kinds of details are important. So let's talk about pedals now, because there are a couple of really important considerations here. Now, these aren't complaints about this particular cockpit. This is just something that's going to be inherent of a kind of go-kart style simulator. That said, if you don't have a center post style design like what we have here, it will allow a little bit more adaptability, as will make sense in just a moment. So most go-karts do have like a fuel tank that will sit somewhere around the steering column, that sort of forces you to have your legs wrapped around the center post. And then in a regular go-kart, like what you can see here, you would normally have your throttle right over on the right-hand side and your brake right over on the left-hand side. Obviously, there's no clutch pedal generally. Now, you probably already see where I'm going with this. A lot of sim racing pedal sets, particularly those that aren't modular, have the brake positioned in the middle and the clutch off on the left-hand side. Your Acertec pedals, for example, if you don't buy the individual pedals, have them spaced very close together and you can't actually adjust them very far apart. And that is gonna create a significant limitation with this particular design, simply because you just can't wrap your legs around to reach that brake pedal if it's sitting bang in the center. So that is gonna be a very important consideration depending on the pedal set you intend to use this with. Anything that you can separate the pedals out, gonna be less of an issue. So the CSL Elite V2 pedals from Fanatec, we did have a look at those as well. You can take out the rear support and actually remove the clutch pedal entirely, but it does require removing of the rear bracing. With the CSL pedals with load cell kit, like what we see here, very simple to just take out the clutch pedal and put the brake pedal right over on the left-hand side. So just be mindful of that depending on what pedal set you intend to use. We do have a decent amount of mounting options available here though, which will allow you to mount things like your Husingvelt pedals or your VRS pedals, for example, directly to the pedal plate. One thing just to be aware of with that though is that there is quite a bit of flex in the pedal tray itself. Now again, how much you notice that in the driving experience is going to come down to the pedal set that you're using. So if you're using a pedal set like the Acertec pedals, for example, which have those integrated pedal trays, you're going to notice that flex a lot less than what you will with, say, a VRS pedal, for example, that would mount directly to the tray and all of that force is going purely just through the tray. So again, for the price, I would like to see a little bit more reinforcement in this tray, or at least some brackets included that you could mount on there to add some reinforcement, but then take off if it gets in the way of mounting your particular pedals. So yeah, definitely some improvements that could be had there. There is plenty of adjustment here available though, in terms of front to rear position. So you've got around 9 inches of movement here from front to back. The slots themselves are a lot longer than that, but obviously you can only go as far as the front and the rear. So all the way forward, all the way back. You can see in there as well, there are some additional nutserts that allow you to sit the pedal completely flat or tilt it up like what we have here as well. So that's going to account for the angle of the majority of sim racing pedals that are out there at the kind of price point that you might be looking at if you're using a cockpit like this. Now, another issue that we've encountered is that the pedal tray itself is actually working its way loose while we're driving. Now you can see it's got 4 knobs, 2 on either side, that you crank down to make the adjustments as we were discussing earlier. What we're finding is that regardless of how hard we crank those down by hand, they still seem to be working their way loose enough that the pedal tray ends up sliding forwards under heavy braking. So again, let us know in the comments down below if you own one of these, if you've had that same problem, but definitely been an issue for us. The other thing just to be aware of here as well is that we did find the width can be a limitation in some cases as well. So the Fanatec CSL Elite and Elite V2 pedals are a little bit wider than the gap between these two mounting plates. So if you've got it in a more rearward position on the tray, then it does clear it. But if you need to sit it down low like what we have here, you aren't actually going to be able to fit that inside the bounds of the tray here, which means you're either going to have the tray so far forward that it clears in front, or have the pedals mounted high enough on the rail that it clears it from behind. But in order to achieve that, you will end up needing to drill additional holes, and you will have some overhang over the back of the tray too. But that will of course end up meaning that you don't have any support behind the pedals, which becomes important when you have to remove that brace like we were talking about before to adjust the position of the pedals. So yeah, compatibility is limited with the CSL Elite and CSL Elite V2 pedals in my experience, but the CSL pedals like what we have here were fine. Moza SRPs fine, CRPs are fine. I'm not going to go through every single pedal set available on the market, just use your own common sense there and just be aware of the limitations created by a go-kart style cockpit with a center steering post. So let's chat a little bit more about the wheel deck now. We already talked about the fact that it was a little bit twisted out of the box and that the replacement that they sent us also had that same twist. Don't need to cover that again, but just wanted to make sure that you, if you skipped to this part of the video, you are aware of that. Go back to the start and check that part out for yourselves for all the information there. So we have about 2.5 inches of ability to raise and lower the wheel deck here. Look, in my experience, and one of the things that I was worried about is that when you get into a situation where you have to start adjusting things manually between different people, that's when things start to get to the point where you just end up not doing it. It just becomes too hard, and you know, the thing doesn't end up getting used very often. So I did quite a bit of driving and switching between me and my 7-year-old son. I'm 6 foot tall. He's typical kind of height for a 7-year-old, and all we found is that we had to adjust the pedal tray, which as you already saw is just 4 bolts, slides into whatever position, and just pull the lever on the seat to slide the seat forward as well. It was a little bit stiff at first, but it has loosened up over time. We didn't actually need to adjust the height of the wheel at all. I actually have the wheel relatively low just because I wanted that genuine kind of kart feel. And yeah, it didn't really pose any issues ergonomically for either of us, which I actually was pretty impressed with. I expected that would probably be something that did introduce quite a bit of frustrations. So very happy, and I would go as far as to say surprised at how easy it was to transition between the two of us. Less than a minute to change the seating position and pedal position and change between drivers, which was really cool. So yeah, 2.5 inches of up and down adjustment here. We also do have some angle adjustment available on the plate as well. So if you do want to have the wheel in a more traditional GT or Formula style angle, you can achieve that as well. Just be mindful that if you're taller, you're not going to be able to ergonomically fit with the wheel in that position. For a 7-year-old, it's absolutely fine. For somebody of my height, you are going to be limited to the karting style, but I don't think that's going to come as a surprise to anybody. Those were just the practical limitations that we found. Now, in terms of mounting options here, you guys can see on the screen for yourselves the various different mounting options available. Covers all of your usual suspects like Fanatec, Thrustmaster, Moza, and so forth. So no complaints whatsoever with regards to that. And I was genuinely impressed with how sturdy this was for a center post style cockpit. It's not completely flex free by any means, but I would say their claim of being able to handle 13 Newton meters is fine. It's going to move around a bit, but it's not going to be the thing that feels like it's flexing the most on the rig. So no major complaints there. It's more sturdy than I expected it to be completely honest with you. So let's move back now to the seat. And look, I was pretty impressed with this seat as well. Look, I am a little bit on the big side for it. I'm around about 90 kilograms, and as I said before, 6 foot tall. Most of my weight does sit around my stomach and my thighs and my butt, unfortunately. But I did find that the little kind of lump that they have in the seat here is a little bit uncomfortable for me. I feel like I'm kind of sitting on top of it rather than sitting in it, if that makes sense. You can actually remove this liner entirely if you wish to do so. It's just got a little drawstring on the back here with some elastics. So that gives you a more traditional karting style seat. And look, these are some of the areas where they have value added a little bit, I would say, for the price point. They didn't have to include this nice padding in here. They could have got away with not having that there at all. You know, whether or not you feel you need that, whether you would have preferred to, you know, provide your own cushion and have a cheaper price point, I mean, that's a subjective thing, but I do like the fact that they include this for you. It is quite comfortable. You can see it's got nice red stitching and an Alcantara-like material throughout the back. Then we've got canvas sides and pleather material on the side bolsters. So for me, at least, it was a relatively comfortable seat. Obviously, being a karting style seat, it's not going to give you that upper back and shoulder or neck support, head support or anything like that, but it does hold you relatively upright, and I certainly didn't notice any flex in the back of the seat whatsoever. The plastic seat itself underneath the cover is actually really thick and really solid, so no complaints there, and it does have quite a decent support structure around it as well. Now, there is a little bit of adjustment available in the seat itself. You can see here there are 3 different adjustment points. We've got it in the furthest back position. You can bring it further forward or do some slight tilting there as well if you need to. One thing I did notice that these little plastic caps that they include inside the box are very loose. They do fall out, so we'll probably end up just not running those at all over time, I would imagine. We do have seat rails under here as well, as I referenced earlier as well. So you literally just pull the rail up just like you would in a regular street car, and you can slide the seat forward and back. It's not something that you can easily do without the whole thing sort of trying to move around just by sitting here, but when you're sitting in the seat, you can drag it forward and slide it back relatively easily, and we have found that it's loosened up over time as well. So I'm sure after a couple of months that will probably become a lot looser than it is right now. But yeah, look, overall, in terms of adjustability for a cockpit of this style, I think it probably does better than I was expecting it to, and particularly when you consider the ease in which you can switch between a tall person like me and a kid, really quite impressive in that regard. So let's talk about the overall driving experience now and wrap things up with some conclusions. Now, look, this is a tricky one to summarize simply because the experience that you're going to get out of this thing is going to vary so greatly depending on whether you're intending to purchase this for a child or intending to use for yourself as an adult or a teenager, whether you're intending to use this for, say, actual real life go-kart training or just casual sim racing, whether you want it to integrate cleanly into a living space or be something that you can fold away in a corner. There's so many aspects to this in terms of what subjectively provides a good driving experience. So I think the best way to summarize it is to sort of give you some observations around what I saw when my kids were driving with it and some of the observations that I have when I'm actually driving it with myself. Now, for me, the experience that I personally get with it is somewhat underwhelming and disappointing given the price point here. I would say, look, if this cost half as much as it does, I'd be willing to let a lot of this little nitpicky kind of stuff like the sharp edges on the bumper bars, for example, slide. Not so much the flex that we have in the cockpit overall. I mean, as you saw in the footage, when I get into the brake, it does buckle and lift up in the middle, which at this kind of price point, I think is just unacceptable. But again, I am braking with around 50 to 60 kilograms of force here. So if you don't brake with anywhere near that force, you're not going to experience that issue. So there's just so many factors to consider here, but yeah, the overall impression that I get is that it is overpriced, unfortunately. It does have a lot going for it in terms of versatility. Ease of switching between children and adults is a very, very big selling point for this. But look, I've got to be completely honest with you guys, and as harsh as it sounds, if I'd spent $600 of my own money on this thing, I would be disappointed with the quality that I'm presented with here, and there's no real way around that. I've got to be honest with you guys. So yeah, look, it's disappointing in that sense, but look, when I got my 7-year-old son down here, he thought it was the coolest thing ever. He sat in here for a number of hours over the weekend and just wanted to drive. He kept on hassling me to come back down here again. And he didn't say, oh, the steering seems wonky or the monitor seems wonky or the pedals are bendy, or he didn't notice any of that stuff. He just loved the experience of driving the thing. And he really thought it was cool that it had the plastic bumper bars and whatnot on it. So look, I think ultimately, if you just want something that looks like this, something that you can jump in and play with the kids occasionally, then you probably will be satisfied with this overall. But I do think that it's too expensive for what you're getting here, particularly when you factor in the fact that you have to pay extra money for the monitor mount. And while they do include a lot of bits and pieces here, the butt kicker mount as well, which we didn't really look at, but there is a butt kicker mount on the back of there as well, which is a good thing to include. You've got the fabric seat cover as well, which they didn't have to include. So look, while I do think that there are quite a few things that are positive about this product overall, I've got to be honest with you guys and say that if I'd spent 600 US dollars of my own money on this thing, I probably would be sending it back. And it's really as simple as that. I think the best way that I can summarize this in one sentence is that the impression I'm left with is that it's a kid's cockpit that adults can also use rather than an adult cockpit that kids can also use. So I think that hopefully will make sense for you guys. So yeah, let us know in the comments down below what you guys think as well. If you own one of these, what's your experience been like? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree completely? That is all really valuable information for people that might be watching this video. So don't be shy in the comments down below. If you've been considering this, maybe list some of the other products down below that you think people should check out as well. We'll be checking out that Camus cart relatively soon as well, which is an interesting one because while it is a little bit more like a go-kart, it is limited to only using the Camus C5 wheel and pedals, so less versatile than something like this. Now, there are a lot of other cockpits available on the market as well. Unfortunately, we haven't tested out any other junior cockpits, but there are some other reviews available out there. And just do your own research there. Make sure you're getting the best possible value for your particular usage case. We do, of course, have all kinds of other sim racing hardware reviews available on boostedmedia.net or right here on the channel as well. And don't forget those discount codes linked down in the description below if you are looking at picking up any gear. Awesome way, as I said before, of picking yourself up a bit of a discount in some cases and also helping out the channel at no additional cost. So we really do appreciate your support there. But above all, guys, thanks again very much for watching. Leave a comment down below, leave a thumbs up if the video has been helpful for you, and I will see you again soon. Bye.